All right, welcome back to another episode of Conspiracy in the Force. My name is Conspiracy Kyle, and today I have a really great guest with me on the show. I have Mr. Jack Allen from the Conspiracy or Just a Coincidence podcast. Jack, how are you doing this evening?
Kyle, I'm doing great. It's always an honor, my man. Always an honor.
Well, I appreciate that. Back when I started my podcast, it's almost coming up on a year. I will give you props. You were very helpful in helping to spread the word about my podcast. You were my very first guest. I
Yeah,
think
yeah, I remember.
many months ago. So I really appreciate the support there, and I really love your podcast, and I really love how much you're into reading, and not many people read anymore. I think you can probably agree with that. What are your thoughts about reading? Like how does it help you out? Like how does it work with you and your lifestyle?
Well, dude, yeah, I mean, it's become a part of my life. In the beginning, I would now I read like after we eat. We go upstairs and but it like is hard though, because in the beginning you're like, oh, I'm watching this show or oh, I'm watching, and then it's so much easier just to scroll on your phone. But eventually, just like anything, it becomes a habit. So now I think my record on my iPad's like 182 days or something like that in a row. So you just like anything, you do like 3 weeks and then it becomes, you know,
Right.
routine.
Muscle memory at
Yeah,
that point,
exactly.
yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, that's my problem. I just bought like 10 Kindle books.
Nice,
So
dude.
so I'm so ADD though. Like I don't
Yeah.
I want to read a little bit out of every single
Right.
book.
Yeah.
So I need some help here. Like, what's your strategy? You just
Dude,
start one book, finish it, do another
dude,
book, finish it.
odd man, we've had that same, like I accumulate these books and then sometimes I don't, I buy them and I don't even, but that's the one good, no one's telling us, so you can do whatever the heck you want to do. But I know like I have to put out a show, my own, material every like 2 weeks. So that keeps me going on, but I do jump around. Like after an hour, I'll switch to another one that I find interesting but yeah, dude, that is one of the challenges. You just accumulate so many books and then you don't get to read them all. So
and
yeah,
that's probably the hard part for you too, is because you're not just reading it, it's you're going through and making notes and stuff
yeah,
for the show too. So it's like basically for you it's kind of like a research project.
yeah, right. That's how I just, and the Kindle sweet because you can highlight and at the end, but then paper books, which I sometimes I have just bought one, but like that's because then I got to put the book down. I do it then, so I won't have to go back and like my handwriting's horrible. I'm reading in bed, so I'm like, so I have like I talk in my phone, but it is what it is. But yeah,
So for anybody who isn't familiar with you or isn't familiar with your podcast, can you give just a little bit of information about your podcast? Some of the stuff
yeah,
you've been talking about recently.
yeah. So it's conspiracy or just a coincidence, and but like Kyle said, I usually just pick a book, whatever. And for a while, I'm kind of branching away a little bit right now, but I've been big on because politics and everything else that's current has upset me so much, so I just have to stop. So I've been reading about Tartaria, and basically though, I mean that's like a big buzzword in this like community now, but basically like I don't go as far as some people may, but are clearly like our history is being manipulated. So that's
Right.
like what the past, I think I've done like 4 or 5 shows on things in our history that just don't make sense.
Right.
No.
Right. And yeah, and we're going to dig into that, and you're going to share your screen here in a second to kind of
Yeah.
go through some of these maps and all the stuff that
Yeah.
doesn't make sense. And the one little Star Wars, I'll throw just I don't want to get too much into Star Wars
No,
because I'm
go
really
for
I'm
it,
really
dude.
interested in the maps. But one interesting kind of parallel as I was listening to your show. So in one of the prequel movies, episode 2, there's this missing planet that's not in the archives. Okay.
Okay.
So they go to the Jedi library, which you'd love that. They go to the Jedi library.
Cool.
They
Yeah.
talk to the Jedi librarian, and she says, well, if a planet doesn't appear in any of our records, it doesn't exist. But
Oh,
so you can see where what was going on
yeah.
here is there was some manipulation going on because people didn't want to find this planet because there was this clone facility
I
growing on there and
see.
all this crazy stuff that was trying to be suppressed and hidden. But her point, and this will kind of dovetail into what I want you to share here is that, exactly what you said. If it doesn't, show up on our map, it doesn't exist.
Yeah.
But how do we know that map is accurate? Who are we trusting to hold the keys to that map in that universe and our universe as well? So I'll turn it over to you to kind of go through some of this that you had talked about previously on your podcast.
I wanted to ask, so I'm reading a book on the hippies, and George Lucas popped up. I don't know if you ever heard, he was at the Rolling Stone concert where,
yes.
Have you heard this before?
Yeah. Is it the Altamont concert?
I forget what it's called, but it's like, I think it's like an outdoor concert. That's at least what I'm imagining. And he was the guy that recorded
the cameraman.
That got stabbed or got shot or something like that.
Yeah. So I actually read about this. Isaac Weishaupt, who I know you've had on your show, he wrote a really good book called The Star Wars Conspiracy a few years ago. And he kind of got into like a little bit of George Lucas's background, and kind of was trying to make a tie in, like, because there's some occult themes within Star Wars, right? There's no God. It's kind of this force that can be pushed and pulled one way or the other.
Right.
So he's like, did George Lucas inherently have some type of occult presence around him? And, and he gets real deep into, I can't even scratch the surface on that. But that was one of the things he said, because George Lucas was a cameraman at this Rolling Stones concert. It was it was called like the Altamont Speedway or something in California.
Yeah.
And a guy rushed the stage to try to stab the Rolling Stone singer or something. And there were so many drugs. There was so much like dark energy, because it was kind of towards the end of the hippie movement. So you got to see things start to turn because the Vietnam War and all this kind of stuff. So his supposition was that possibly did George Lucas indirectly come into contact with some spirit or occult or something. But I know exactly what you're talking about, because he was involved with he was in some of that stuff. So that's interesting.
I just wanted to I had it because I thought of you when that came up, and I was like, damn, that's wild. But all right, so do you want to screen share? I don't know, what do I have to hit it, or do you have to?
I think you can go down to the screen and hit the share content button. It should be available.
I got it. Let's see.
Okay,
that works. It all right. Can you see my screen?
Yep.
All right. I'm small, but who cares? All right. So we'll start. So like all of our history is from what we like have accepted is written by a guy, Joseph Scaliger. And that was like in the 1540s to 1600s. And then it gets finished by like a Jesuit priest who I forget his name. But everything basically they used ancient Egypt, which is like the dynasties are for the pharaohs is, I guess, recorded to some extent, and they just plugged it in from there. And so there's so many issues with it, like carbon-19 dating, like how we would think, oh, this history is set in stone. Carbon-19 dating doesn't, they only use it when it reassures whatever claim they're making. So like we really have no way of knowing how old and how previous civilizations were. And just to say that this is like a new theory, Isaac Newton thought this as well. He thought that they added an extra like 1,200 years. He died before he could really finish his book, never gets published, or gets published and then pushed away. And the comments about it were like, oh, he was, with madness, with genius comes some insanity. Like, so this isn't just like a new theory that just came out, right? But I'll show you. So I just wanted to preface that. So these maps in 1771, the Encyclopedia Britannica came out, and they had all these maps in there. And let me pull like a normal one up from that map. I'm trying to find like so we'll do this one. I guess this isn't even good. But so all these maps were in there, right? So like the thing that was interesting about it was, sorry, my map order is even for my show is all screwed up. All right, here we go.
That's all right.
These are good. All right. So like for this one, this was America in 1771. So you see California is this one. Well, so you see the undiscovered land up here in the Northwest, right? That's like the first thing that comes out, which doesn't make, so, and someone commented before about Lewis and Clark, but we'll there's previous maps, so we'll get to that. But it's just, and then the big thing about it is there's this huge land called Tartaria, and it's hard to like see. I don't know if we can zoom in, but like you see,
In what year was this map again?
1771. So
1771. Okay.
Trying to get like a good.
Yep, I can see it there on the
Here's
side.
Muscovite, Tartaria, yeah. And so this land was the largest country in the world. It was 3 times larger than I think. It's 3 million square miles. So it was the largest country in the world. And until we had like Tartaria came in our truth or whatever, all media community, I never heard of it, So like how this was, I mean, there's empires that existed now. There's very powerful countries. How would one land, Tartaria, they would have to be able to defend these borders.
Right.
They must be significant, right? Because like, how could you defend your borders without it being like a formidable foe?
Right. And for anybody that's not watching on the video, it's kind of Tartaria. It looks like it's kind of in the Eastern European type area, right? Like
right.
Maybe northeastern, so like north of Germany.
Yeah. So it's
almost kind of Russia-ish.
Yeah. So it's Siberia. It's large part of China and kind of like, I guess, so you like Ukraine-y kind of, like that Eastern Europe area, but it's huge. So it goes all to Siberia down to like, it's China's right here. So there's China was smaller. So I guess like modern day Manchuria. And, but the idea is that this is probably like the remnants of the Mongolian horde.
Mm-hmm.
And so like I guess the whole big theory is that this powerful empire that's extended from Europe all the way to our Americas, that's how we got all of these fancy buildings that we have like in the world expositions. It was a worldwide empire, and they had very high technology. Like in my exposition episodes, the World's Fairs, I mean, these buildings were built out of this blue glass that like helped plants grow, could heal things. And they built all like the amazing masonry that we have today that you're like, damn, how did they build that? That was this Tartarian empire that that's expanded everywhere.
That's wild. And these maps are crazy looking. I mean, and that's the other thing too. It's like, how do we even know that the shape of our current map even is accurate? And how maybe this is more accurate. I mean, how many of us have taken a drone or a helicopter around the world and mapped all this stuff out? Nobody.
Right.
So how do we know what is right? And just because it's so far off and so skewed versus what we at least quote unquote know now is crazy.
Yeah, dude. Yeah. And that's the other point. Like so like even things as simple as where we claim that the Bible all happened in the Middle East. Like this stuff was all right. Like before Napoleon, no European supposedly set forth in like since the Crusades in the Middle East and all this stuff like that. But yet they have all these basically like we get all our names from all these places from ancient times. They're supposedly passed on. But when things that are written in all these ancient languages, because paper is very scarce, they don't use any vowels. So you're going, you know what I'm saying? So like even the Bible is written without any vowels. So words like, I give this example, blood, we say it's blood, but it could be bled, it could be boiled, because it would be written BLD. So the like a name continuing, and there's plenty of examples of names changing in locations like Amsterdam in this around this time period. I can like find, but they named it 2 different. It was like Amstel, Dram, and that's just a simple solution. But so that you could see how easy name place, like say they said it, the Crusades happened in the middle, like they didn't use the Middle East, in Jerusalem. Well, there's no real, like, we've never found any biblical proof that Jerusalem is where they say it is. So it's easy that they could have just moved the location, maybe to avoid us finding something, or just to, just like that power structure. Right. But yeah, it's just a mess, dude.
And even with, talking about the Bible there, I mean, there's so many different translations that how do you know there wasn't anything nefarious going on there about people, you know, intentionally or unintentionally changing some of the meanings of these words. And now, you know, hundreds or thousands or however many years later, we're thinking about things in a completely different way versus what it was originally, you know, intended, the intended spirit of it.
Yeah,
you know,
dude.
books, I guess books in general too.
Yeah, and I mean, and so like I said, how Isaac Newton said it was shorter. A bunch of other people said the timeline was shorter, but so all these events that supposedly happened in like 300 AD, the Bible, all these they had, I think, Council of Nicaea, which all they have is like one picture of it to say that it happened, but so that was like this event where they took all these books, they made the Bible supposedly in this Council of Nicaea. But the problem is the oldest documents that we have are from like the thousands AD. That's the oldest documents we have. And we date everything off of handwriting. So again, that carbon dating thing, we have you would think like, oh, the Bible, we have ancient copies. We don't. We have copies of copies, and they pop up around conveniently right around like 1400. It's like when all these ancient documents come up. So I'm just saying this to show like what we have, like no time could literally be like, we could only have been civilized for like 600 years and you wouldn't be able to like prove otherwise. You know, it's just ingrained in us.
And I'm kind of leaning towards you because just think of all the technological advancements that have happened in the past, say 50 years. And, you know, you can kind of take a few points of view, right? You take the people who believe that the earth has been around for millions of years. You're telling me in millions of years, we just had all these scientific breakthroughs and technological breakthroughs in the past, you know, since 1950. And then even the biblical view, which I think the biblical view is about, you know, 6,000 years, is like same thing, right? I mean, all this time, and it's just now being this technologically advanced in a very escalated manner with nothing even close to that in you know 100 200 years ago.
And speaking of like technology, like this is also how they date stuff, and this is literally how they do it. So they base everything off like the pharaoh's timeline. So say they find like a pharaoh's product they have is like a necklace. I'm using a bad example, but that necklace they find in a grave in North Africa or in the Middle East, and then in that Middle East they find a lot of cups that look a certain way. Well, then if they find that cup in Germany, that means that they were contemporary in their model of working. Like, so you find in one grave, you see how like they connect it, and that's how they say that certain people are contemporary. So you can see how easily that's not very, you know,
right,
solid evidence.
Right. It's very subjective. A lot of this is very subjective based on quote unquote experts who have done this.
Right. And then like the Scaliger guy who wrote he talks about the Bronze Age and like, you know, this is the technology they had during the Bronze Age. But the issue with the Bronze Age is to make bronze, you need copper and tin. And both, I think, are found freely in the earth, but they didn't discover tin until after the Bronze Age. So like you know, either they just didn't tell anybody that they had this technology, or they messed up the timeline because Scaliger wasn't I don't know who plays with metals, but you know, a metallurgist,
alchemist. I think that's like
a metallurgist, but like he didn't specialize in that, so he just thought, well, yeah, they have bronze instruments. This was so many years ago, but the invention of tin or whatever didn't happen until later. So
right.
Yeah.
So I want to talk a little more about the Tartaria because I know very little about this. You know, I've heard a little bit from your podcast and a few other sources, but I kind of want to just know a little bit more about it. You touched on a little bit about, you know, somewhat of a technologically advanced society. Kind of what was kind of like the power structure like what was kind of the culture like? Any more context you have on that?
Yeah. So I don't know if like they're definitely powerful. So there's like, I feel like there's probably like a few camps. Like I know some people think that they were like using like churches, like our churches were readapted to be places of worship, that those were actually places of healing. So like, and I don't know, but what I do like can say for sure is like they were a powerful nation. They probably had like the Khan, because that's like how the Mongols, you know, like Genghis Khan.
Right,
and
right.
they were a seafaring, like they were able to travel the world, and that's how they. So I know there one guy, Andreas Zertas or whatever. He's big on that, like they weren't a like warring culture, but then like the one of the classic authors, Fomenko, who wrote a lot of books all about Tartaria, he thinks that they were kind of like that's why Russia fought them, because Russia and the Romanovs battled heads with Tartaria and they lost. But so I don't know like what their, I couldn't say anything about like their government, but
Right.
clearly they were a builder class that may have invented, I know this sounds crazy, like flying, like big hot air balloons.
Mm-hmm.
And that was like how they traded everywhere. And that was like not like dragons and a few other animal symbols like the dragon. And, but that's why like Scotland is a dragon. Why we have,
Right.
oh, griffins. That's what I'm thinking. Griffins. So like griffins are all in the New World on all these 1800 buildings that we built. But that, what does the griffin have to do with at all with us? But that's
Right.
like their symbol on their flag. So I know that didn't answer your question, Kyle.
No, no, that's okay. It's really interesting because this isn't something that you ever see referenced in popular culture or like a movie about it, or even like honestly, like even documentaries. Like I can't know any that I've seen or been had seen referenced regarding this Tartarian. And like literally, I just Googled it, which is the worst way to do any research for anybody listening. And one of the first thing that comes up is Tartaria hoax, and then Tartaria CIA. Like so, like that they're trying to, and it's hard to say one way or the other what the truth is, but the fact that there hasn't been much made about. I mean, God, there's been movies about monsters, giants, dragons, spaceships,
Right.
but there's not going to be a movie about this other potential. If nothing else, it's just an interesting topic.
Yeah. And just, I know I'm bouncing like all around. I don't, but
Oh
so
no,
like
that you're perfectly fine.
to show you like with this knowledge stuff. So this map, I think, was from like right around maybe 1750s, because every 10 years. So you see like how California is drawn as an island. And this was bringing up the one comment I got was like Lewis and Clark didn't discover till 1806. So this was 1750, we'll say, right? And then, but in but then in 1500s we have the Mercator map, which has the whole Northwest drawn and California as an island. So I say this just to bring out the point that like our timeline is just so either we like get smart, like then they used this pattern before, like with the Dark Ages, like they say we get this technology, then something happens, we lose it for 300 years, and then it pops up again, right? Like so They did the same. They're just I think they're like extending it to make things seem longer, or to, and even if it's not like called Tartaria, what there has to be some like builder class or some group of people that were able to use technology that we don't have access to today. Because, and like I don't know if you watched the World's Fair exposition, but these things they made, dude, were just.
Yeah, bring up some of these pictures, because that's very interesting. This was what, like 1904, or maybe were there some before that?
Yeah, this one's 1890, and this is the Chicago World's Fair. And so this was like, let's see if there's a better, let's see if I can make it a little bigger for us. But just so so in 2 years, that's what the claim is, which Chicago's cold for how many months out of the year? Like 5, 4, in 2 years, they were able to take 700 acres of swamp, drain the swamp, make canals, make lakes with horses and picks and shovels. And they were able to build all this stuff. And they did it all over the world, not just Chicago. They did it all in the United States. They did it all in the world, in different countries. And like, as much as we like to think like, oh, if you just put your mind to it, you can do it. This is far more impressive and they were temporary supposedly, but they kept some of the buildings, but they destroyed the others. They all would burn in a fire, every single one of them.
Right.
And they lost money consistently. They would lose like on today's standard, something like $200 million. And they just kept doing it again and again. Like that makes our business, like Rockefeller is cutthroat. They're not going to lose 200 million and then do it 20 times, you know?
Right. And that's a crazy picture over there with that huge, I don't know, statue kind of thing. Like when was I don't even know this. I have to look this up. Like when was the first camera invented?
Well, that's another thing, dude. So the camera was like, I forget, it was right before, I think 1850 was right around the first camera, but that's also up for speculation because like before that they had these lithographs that they could take photos of. And the one guy brings up the point, like he thinks that cameras existed far beyond, like just at this World's Fair. I don't know if it was this one or St. Louis, they were able to, the one like attraction was that you could talk to somebody through a cell phone. So it had no wires, it wasn't hooked up to anything, and you could talk to somebody else. And like there's this technology. They also, I know this doesn't have to do technology, but at the Chicago World's Fair, they had a stand for each country. And the Vikings, like Sweden, they built an actual Viking ship from back in the day, and they sailed it to America for the event.
Of course they did.
Right. So like if they could do it today, you know, they did it before. But that was just, I found that like really amusing. Like they rowed a Viking ship from Europe to America in the 1890s. And like no one thought like, wow, if they could do it then, I wonder if they could have done it before that. But
yeah. that is just bizarre. I speaking of the camera, I saw a great meme the other day, and it said, you know, hey, here's a picture of the first camera, and then the caption was like, well, where's this picture coming from then? How are you taking a picture of the first camera if this is the first camera? It was because, to your point, like a lot of this is so kind of hokey. Like there's no way of knowing, you know. And honestly, like pretty much anything pre-internet or pre-film, it's a black hole, and it's so based on conjecture. And you know, you talk about the carbon dating, you're talking about artist renderings, you're talking about so many other things that could be manipulated in one way, shape, or form.
Dude, yeah, and like so one of the things I've seen everywhere, like all these World's Fairs, though, they're all built in 2 years, and even like France. So France had it's always a big fire, and how fire burns stone, which they built most of their like the nice structures out of. You know, I don't understand that, but they'll always say that. And but France, this reconstruction, I think it happened in 1782. But all the beautiful buildings that we have in France today, they were all rebuilt in like 10 years with, I'm like spelling words wrong. I'm reading, that's why I'm struggling. I just want to show you the pictures. But they built all this stuff so quick, like all France today, like all this stuff was built in the same time in like 10 years with just men, shovels, and pickaxes.
Right.
After a big fire. And it literally doesn't work, you know, it
right.
doesn't make any sense. We can't do any of that today. You know,
even and you know, and it's kind of a different thing than Tartaria, but I mean, you know, going back to, you're talking about Egypt earlier, right? Look at the pyramids. And you know, the story from, well, I guess it's really not a story from the Bible. I think it's maybe just supposition that, you know, it was the Israelite slaves that, you know, built these gigantic pyramid structures, right? And look how perfectly symmetrical they are. Like how single people could do that with no technology is crazy. And then the other, in the Sphinx too, right? The Sphinx.
Yeah.
Beautiful structures. You don't see people build, if they could build pyramids like that, why aren't they doing it today?
Yeah.
You know, why wouldn't somebody say, hey, let's go out here and build a pyramid? Like out in like Arizona or something, like, hey, that'd be pretty cool.
Right.
Like nobody does it. Like same reason, like why haven't we gone back to the moon? We quote unquote could 60 years ago.
Right.
But apparently something changed, or something didn't happen the way we were meant to believe.
Also, and going on Egypt, they you know, that whole Egyptology is such like it's like a little club, you know. So like all the information you get like, you know, you think about it, you get accepted as being an Egyptologist, and now if you have a family, you're not going to speak out and say, I think you guys are all wrong, because they're going to get rid of you. So that's why the
Right.
narrative of Egypt always stays the same. But even like what was interesting is like this stuff is supposedly what, like 2000 BC, like
Hmm.
5000 to 2000 BC,
Yeah.
and lasted, you know, fine for whatever 7,000 years. And now like the Sphinx is having like serious damage. Lots of things are like, you know, kind of on their last legs, and
Right.
Egyptologists blame that on pollution. But
Hmm.
so you're telling me something lasted 7,000 years, and then just, you know, another coincidence that just now, like there's stuff breaking off on the Sphinx, and like it's just happening just now, this stuff is happening, or is it probably not that old, and
Right.
you're just you know, like it like anything, you know, after a few hundred years
Oh,
it'll,
right. No, normal climate change. I hate using the word climate change, but I mean
yeah,
it does change all the time. I think what I
right,
was trying to say is erosion, right? Like
right, yeah,
over
exactly.
time, like in here in another, you know, a Star Wars tie-in, like the place they filmed Star Wars in
Mhm.
Africa. You know, people can't even go back to look at that place anymore because there's been so many sandstorms in the area,
Really?
and it's kind of covered all that stuff over. So, I mean, in the desert, there's huge windstorms. There's all this crazy kind of stuff. So, yeah, just kind of normal stuff that happens over
Right.
time.
Yeah, dude. It's just, and like I'm just bringing up random stuff now, but like this church in Germany, supposedly, according to Scaliger, I might be saying his name wrong. This church supposedly was started. It was a medieval church built starting in like 1200. Well, it didn't get finished till 18, right around the same time we're having all these World's Fairs. So you're telling, like, according to mainstream history, this church took 600 years to build, and it is a magnificent church. It's very beautiful, but
Hmm.
to take what you can't even get people to agree on, you know, like anything. So you're telling me you were able to control 6 centuries of people to work on something, you know, every whatever. Like that, no, there's no way that's possible. Like people, I have no idea what my family member did 600 years ago. And then one, if there is one at 600 years from me from now, we'll also have
Right.
no idea, you know?
And just the basic facts of, like, you know, let's say devil's advocate, they could get all the materials rounded up to make that in that time, right? There's also the architects and stuff behind it, right? There's geometry involved, there's all this other stuff. Any of that could have gone wrong without other kinds of intervention. Just the fact that it looks so perfect.
Mhm.
And you know, you look at modern construction nowadays, and you know, stuff doesn't even come close to this with all the materials and chemicals and whatever we can make out of a lab now to build. It's just crazy that this stuff looks so beautiful, and you'll never see this kind of stuff ever again.
Yeah, and that was like another point that brought like this ancient culture that someone, because I'm pretty like convinced that there was something, either if it wasn't a culture, if it wasn't, there was a group of people, there was like a tribe that whatever had this ability, was sharing it with like the world, and was able to build, you know, all these structures, and then that they hid that, maybe they destroyed them, whatever. But like all these old buildings, they had so much like their angles and everything. Like I don't know if the word soul is the word to use, but they had like I don't know the word I'm looking at, like maybe soul or
Hmm.
feeling or, and
Right.
they'll always like destroy these things, and then they put up some horrible thing. Like what was before Madison Square Garden? Because you know Madison Square Garden was this beautiful, this gorgeous. I forget what it was, but it was ever before Madison Square Garden. I'll find it eventually. But whatever that, it was this gorgeous thing, dude. And they ripped it down and they put up just this stadium, you know?
Right.
And that's what they
Right.
always do. And always these fires, like the one fire in Chicago. So that World's Fair, it burned down supposedly because a cow kicked over a candle, and that just set the whole city on fire.
I was gonna say, yeah, I remember that story, but now that you mention it in conjunction with the World's Fair, wow,
And then
wow,
conveniently on that day, also on that day, 4 massive fires started out simultaneously up around the lakes of Michigan, which burned, a large percentage of the city. So it just, like, what are I'm sure that always happens at 5 major fires that destroy a whole place. And
yeah.
the theory is too, like, so a lot of these buildings are stone. So how did they burn down? But like, they look very similar to, like, when you look at a bombing in Germany and Dresden. That's how, like, after the Chicago fire, after the World's Fair, Chicago fire, 1890s. Like, it doesn't look like like, it looks just like if I showed you a picture of Dresden or one of the Hiroshima or whatever, they look exactly the same. So I think like there is so much evidence. Like, again, it's like kind of like the 9/11 towers. Like,
Right.
it would have to burn so hot, dude, to knock over brick, to burn stone. Like, it would literally, you know what I mean? It would literally need to melt these type of buildings. And that just from a candle, from someone kicking over an animal, barnyard animal
Yeah.
kicking over a candle, and then just happening simultaneously. I think this is one of
Right.
the photos I was in the. But yeah, like,
And that's like, and that's a fact that is in history books, that's in textbooks. Everybody, I mean, I remember reading that about a cow kicking the thing over and burning down the whole city. I mean, it seems silly now that we're talking about it, but like, just think how many people just read that, like, oh, that's exactly what happened, because I just read it in the scholastic history book in 4th grade.
Dude, and you'd say, oh yeah, because they're old and they're stupid that they did that. Like, just another thing in Chicago, because before Chicago, like, started out as like a bunch of fields supposedly, and then, like, it was like a camp for the Civil War, and then they sent some soldiers out and they said, oh, we like this land, so they built Chicago, and then they said, crap, they built these huge, they built this like 6-story hotel that could hold thousands, these beautiful buildings, all these arches. You see, they don't have, this is like the lithograph kind of thing I was telling you about. Well, then they realized, oh shoot, we built it on a swamp. So you know what we're going to do? We're going to raise it. So this is a picture of them supposedly they left, the hotel was still open when they did this. They didn't close the hotel.
What?
They lifted this hotel 5 feet in the air and then shoved a bunch of rocks to build a new foundation on it. And this is in 1850.
Yeah, of course. I mean, It's pretty simple.
And they didn't stop there. They then decided, we have to do the whole block. So then they did the whole block. They lifted the whole block on with just horses and men power. And
we do have a house nearby us where and my wife told me about this 20 some years ago. They did lift it up and move it, but you have to use lots of construction equipment. You have to use flatbed trucks. I mean, you're telling me they did this with a hotel and horses and
it was
rocks.
still open, dude. People were still shopping. That's while they're walking. And the guy, who mastermind behind this, where did he come from? He had no architect experience, but he lived in San Francisco, which was just built founded like 10 years before this happened. And he had to do it a lot in San Francisco. So what huge buildings they're building in like the 5 years that they actually were building anything in San Francisco. It's just all of our stories, like they're laughable almost, like and that's why I think it's true. Like, why have we never heard of a country that's 3 million square miles, whatever that means. I don't know what square miles means, but whatever that means. I don't know. Do you know what a square mile is?
Like 1 by 1, like a cube, maybe.
Oh, okay, that might be it. I was having this conversation with someone else, and he didn't know either.
Yeah, like I do work in the medical industry, and we see a lot of stuff like this is a 1 square centimeter bandage or whatever, and it's just a perfect square but
Okay.
just, 1 centimeter on each side. So 300, what do you say, 300
I think
million
it's like
miles?
3 million something.
3 million miles. So
Yeah.
3 million miles by 3 million miles. That's
Damn.
the square. That is, yeah. So it's not just like a long rectangular thing, right? This is a huge,
Okay. Yeah.
humongous
So
area.
it's huge then. Yeah. But that, this huge landmass that just somehow was left alone, and how we didn't. So this was also in the Britannica Tartary right here. So it was independent. Oh yeah, right here, 3 million, and nothing even comes close. It's 3 times larger than everything else. Right here,
Right.
Muscovy Tartary. So that's why, like, there has to be, and I get, maybe like they weren't a warfaring culture. Maybe they thought like trade was the best way. And then, just like how we talk about like the cabal or the Illuminati, some group decided like we have to remove this if we want to continue get power. And
Right.
and that was also like, so all our old buildings, like I'm in Philly, so we have City Hall, Philadelphia building. You'll never find any pictures of them building the thing. They're like,
Huh.
what can I
That's
search?
real. That's really interesting.
How did they? What's a pre or construction pictures?
Yeah.
Try
Yeah.
that.
It's like looking up pictures of, Michelle Obama pregnant.
Exactly.
They don't exist.
Exactly. So this is what the most they'll have is the foundation has been set. They did the first like 3 floors, and that's the oldest picture I've been able to find of it because I've searched this before. And that's the same thing with almost everything. You can't find any photos of them building these things. And you can't use like the excuse like, oh, photos are expensive, because this is a huge expensive project. You would want to photograph, like, so this is like they didn't put William Penn on yet, and which was still an amazing feat in itself. But there's no photos of them breaking ground or whatever.
Right.
Starting.
Well, yeah, because honestly, like, these huge projects, there had to be investors involved, right? And investors that were footing the bill on this, and they need to know the progress, right? So they need to see photos, they need to see documents. Why is that not a thing? That's very peculiar.
Dude, and like this was the New York, I think it was called Penn Station, but like just this beautiful, is this big enough? Can you see that?
Yeah, yeah, that's good.
But like all this glass, all this stuff like that. And they claim these things are like just out of disrepair, and that's why they get rid of it. Have you ever seen Mad Men?
No, haven't.
It's like it takes place in the 50s, but they have a scene where they're protesting taking it down. But that's what they do all like, so they obviously can't take down Philly City Hall, but they take down enough of these buildings because they don't want you like sniffing around to see what's, like, wow, this is, because City Hall in Philly is the largest freestanding building without any concrete, something like that. Like there is no mortar, it's just rocks on rocks. Like,
right.
That's very, like how did these people do that? Like, who brought the material? How did you, it just, all these logistical questions, just, we're missing something, we're missing something big.
We are. And, going back to, what we learn in school from history textbooks, we all know about this lone cow, that created the fire. I mean, my God, let's talk about like the lone gunman theory. Right. Now it goes back to the lone cow theory. I mean, they've been really working this lone angle for centuries now. I mean, my God. But, we know about that, but, we don't. I mean, did you ever remember hearing anything about Tartary in school, in your textbooks or anything? No, not even a whiff of it.
Yeah.
I mean, you're only really ever taught American history when you, even in terms of geography, you're taught current geography, right? You're talking about, here's the continents, here's the countries, and that's it. How it is currently, like nothing that happened before that is even relevant unless it's just, the few hundred years in America. But the rest of the world, like nobody has ever taken the time to inform people about that. And that's very problematic from a lot of angles. I just think we need to know what is happening in the world, because it affects us as well.
Yeah. Yeah, dude. And just like in school, I mean, you'll deal with it with, we all will with our kids, but like it's so easy to manipulate history. Like people
Hmm.
think like, how could you lie? They can't do that. But it's so, even back then, it's so easy, dude. Like you control the school systems. And with public schooling, it's even, or, mandatory schooling, it's even easier. You just tell the kids what happened. The parents are too busy from work to, question everything, and they were taught the same thing, and that's it then. That's it.
Right.
There is
Right.
no questioning of anything. And yeah, it'd be
Right.
so
Right.
easy to manipulate or to get rid of something that you didn't want.
Yeah.
Simple.
That's very true, and it goes between things from mundane things that really don't may not really matter, but it gets into really serious things, like when you talk about 9/11 and all kinds of stuff that they've been really, if it's printed in a textbook, it's considered truth,
Right.
and when you're a kid, you have to answer A, B, C, or D on the exam. One of those is right, one of those is wrong, according to that textbook
Yeah.
that was funded by the Rockefellers and
Yeah.
whoever else
Right.
that is in control of this stuff. So hey, one other question I wanted to ask you.
Yeah.
I know you'd kind of talked about this on a prior podcast, and you mentioned a little bit earlier about the Dark Ages.
Hmm.
Um, what's the deal behind the Dark Ages? I don't remember the premise of the
Yeah.
podcast you had, but there was a theory that the Dark Ages didn't necessarily exist.
Right.
Is that am I on the right track
Yeah,
there?
you're that's exactly it, dude. So basically before the Dark Ages, so the Dark Ages supposedly happened like 674 to 974. That's the 300 years that we lost all technology. We were living like backwater hunter-gatherer tribes, maybe some farming and stuff like that. And what caused the mainstream story, what caused the Dark Ages was like the fall of the Roman Empire. Then during our European Dark Ages, Rome falls. The Muslim Empire has its 300 golden years, and they just lay siege to all these once powerful European cities, and they just kick the shit out of us. And then after those end, then finally, the year 1000 comes, and America, the Catholic Church, gets its power again, and then we start the Crusades, and then that kind of leads us in and out. But the thing is, there's so many things wrong with it. It goes into like one, they have no archaeological evidence to prove this. So like they claim 300 years, but they don't have a single thing that exists in those 300 years. And someone might say like, oh, well, that's the Dark Ages, that they didn't build anything. But that, like in the Muslim countries, there's nothing else. They use coins, which are supposedly dated. That's the biggest evidence they have. They find all 300 years of coins in one same house. So like what a grandfather's holding, passing down the same coin for 300 years,
Right.
And this even ties into then like, so why would someone add 300 years is probably like the biggest question, right? So like the reason why they did this was there was this guy, King Otto, and he was in Germany. And so he was a very, very Christian guy, like extremist. And back then, no one, first, very low literacy rate. Back
Hmm.
then, everybody wanted to know when Jesus was coming back. Nobody really cared. Oh, Jesus was born 600 years ago. Okay, but when is he coming back? That's the big question. So that's how they did their maps or their calendars. So Otto, being the fanatic that he was, he found like these Christian scholars, and he went with the guy that said Jesus is going to be coming back soon. So he went with him, obviously, because that he wanted to be king when Jesus came back. So Otto thought it would like sound. So he got together with the Pope at the time, and they said, let's say it's year 1000 because they think Jesus is going to return. And so like Otto and Jesus can walk hand in hand, and
Wow.
it'll be that. And so and again, there's the priests that only wrote the history books. So
Right.
that's why there's all these Dark Age forgeries even now. Because you would say, like, why would somebody forge a Dark Age document? It's because all these priests, that's what they were, or monks, whatever
Yeah.
you want to call. and they all backfilled in this history, and because it set precedent for the church. So that's why the church crowned Otto king of the empire, the Europe empire, and it made the church the only ones that could crown you. So, and then the next question would be like, well, okay, so the Christians could do that. All right, but how did you get the Muslims to go along with it? And this is like where I gets like there's like all this evidence, but in conclusion, Muhammad was conveniently, he was started in these dark ages, and there's no evidence that Muhammad ever ruled. He was also inserted into this dark age history to bring together all of these people that were kind of bickering in the Middle East, because you had the Persian Empire versus the Arabs, and this is how they created this huge Muslim empire, Islamic empire, by telling this story about this guy who went around conquering this amazing, mighty, powerful Persian empire while riding camels. And that's the story that they're told right now. Like, a guy on a camel was able to conquer an empire that the Roman Empire couldn't stop, couldn't fight. They just kept their dividing line. But yet this man was able to, go commit jihads and take over.
Wow, that's crazy. But I mean, it's feasible though, because like you said, it back in that time, it was like a caste system, right? There was the haves and the have-nots, and the people who were very poor, they couldn't read. The priests and all the Catholic leaders could say whatever they wanted. I mean, right. There's all the stories about how they, I forget what the exact phrase is, but they told all the peasants that they had to pay a certain amount if they wanted to get to heaven, because that's what it said in the Bible.
Right.
And, and they did it because they had no way of knowing that was wrong. It was just the authority of the time was telling them that. And honestly, like, let's be honest, that's really no different than it is nowadays with most people, even with all the knowledge and technology and everything at our disposal to look up, research things for ourselves. 99% of people don't do it. And, they just kind of click on the TV and say, okay, that's what it is. Or look at one news headline and say, okay, well, that's what I'm supposed to believe. Right. So it's really like we talk down to some of these peasants from those days, but like, how many people do we know that are exactly like that nowadays?
I absolutely agree. Like, how many people, if you asked like a man on the street, could they, like you say, like, what was going on in America in 1850? They would have, maybe some people would say like, Civil War, Abe Lincoln, maybe. But like most people do, they wouldn't have any idea. And that's the same with these people. But they couldn't read. And like you said, they listened to their priests, and that they, one day they just woke up and they didn't really care how wet day of the cat, they didn't really know. And like, even this was another thing. So like, we have all these dates for everything that like when Scaliger, that guy who wrote the history books, when he did his timelines, he would give you the exact day, time, and hour, like day, month, year, hour that an event happened. Well, in the 1500s, dude, people still we were using sundials, which only work when it's sunny. Or the only clock was the church, and the church kept their time by monks. They knew how many pages they could read of like a scripture in an hour. So when they finished that, they'd ring the bell, and that was, or they would light candles. So like this candle would burn for an hour. So like kings did that till the 1700s. They would have like a candle guy with them, and he would light the candles, and that's how they knew what time it was. So like you can see like how easily things can just be totally manipulated,
Right.
The big point about the Dark Ages, which was like stuck out to me, was like, so the Dark Age, supposedly Muslims came in, they raped all these Christian women, they took our land, they did all this stuff, and instead of striking back, we said, let's wait 300 years, let's sit on it, let's think about it. But if you remove the Dark Ages, then the Muslims came in, they raped, they took all this land, they took a third of Christian lands, killed like an insane amount of Christians. And then we waited about 5-10 years, and then we went and had the Crusades. Now, that timeline makes much more sense than you waiting 300 years and then just to pick a fight with another empire. You know what I mean?
Right, to exact revenge. Like you're
Right.
gonna wait, 10 generations,
Right, which is
That's a really,
absurd.
that's a really long con that
Yeah.
it
And like
doesn't really
you'd
make
have
much
to be like,
sense.
you tell your grandchild, his grandchild, he needs to fight back, like, and do that like another 20 times. But
Right, without the message getting skewed one way or the other in the
right,
telephone game.
exactly, dude. So like, it's just all. I don't know what to, like believe anymore. We're just so manipulated with like everything. I don't know what you can say for sure. And that's why there's a lot of great groups though. Like if my one friend, he owns a website, stolenhistory.net, and they're smarter people than me, and they write all this stuff about that they call it like Beethoven, for example. Beethoven wrote like whatever it was, he would need to write over like 300 sheets a day of music in his lifetime. In like the 30 years and then half of those years he was deaf.
Right, right,
And it's
right.
like they do this with these stories. Like Helen Keller flew a plane. She's blind, deaf, and mute, but she can fly a plane. She wrote 12 books and she can fly a plane. And I think they do this like as a joke because, like
Yeah,
Beethoven, so maybe he was very skilled, or it was the music from the Tartarian Empire that had healing ability, like that Hertz stuff. Like they
right.
played at that right, correct Hertz for your body. And they made up this guy and they're like, and then make him deaf and then make him, love to drink. It'll be hilarious. And that's like I think, what I mean? Because it just,
Yeah, and they all
funny.
like Beethoven, Mozart, all of them. It's like, oh, well, they wrote their first symphony at 3 years old. Like,
Right.
come
Maybe it
on.
was Mozart. Maybe it was Mozart too.
But all of them, like, it's
Yeah.
like they're 4 or 5 years old. Oh, they just wrote their fifth concerto. Like sure they did. Sure they did. How do we know? I mean,
Right.
I have a kid that age. He ain't doing anything. He ain't doing anything close to that. But
And
then it goes back to like, was it a different culture? Were there things that they knew,
right.
or were there different things going on that allowed them to have that
And
kind of
maybe,
knowledge or brain function?
maybe. And like that, I'm not saying like it's all, but like, that's what they do with these stories. And I don't know I don't know if it's like a joke, but like obviously Helen Keller did not write 12 books, right? She did not fly a plane like by herself. She's how that doesn't make, and like I'm not saying like the Beethoven or Mozart thing is, but I think that they add this stuff in our history, and they duplicate our history. That was the thing. Also, I learned like there was 3 Platos that existed. They
Huh.
all wrote the same exact stuff, all about whatever Plato wrote about, and they all existed. They would always find out about the other Plato as they found the new Plato's works. So like,
Huh.
so like there's a 1300s Plato. He wrote like the exact same, almost word for word of the ancient Plato, but they didn't find the ancient Plato works until the contemporary Plato died. And then they said, oh my God, look at this ancient Plato. And that's what they did with Copernicus, with Plato, with all these people, dude.
All the philosophers. Wow,
Yeah.
that's bizarre. And I'll agree with you that this stuff it's troubling, but at the same time, I'm with you. I think a lot of this is more interesting than getting into a lot of the political machinations of our day. Because my God, it's impossible anymore to even go on the internet, just because everything is polarizing one way or the other. Some of it, like, you just have to laugh at, but some of it just like, give me a break. There's got to be other interesting things we can look into. And
right.
this is what we're talking about here. This is the basis of everything that's happened, right? Because if some of this, people think like fake news has just started existing in the past 50 years or so, but like, let's be honest, like it's been going on throughout history. And you had a great point a bit ago. You said, maybe they're just doing this to laugh at us. And I agree that they probably are adding these little things in here, like, ha ha ha. They don't know that this is false. We're going to put that in there as a little joke. And then, just have a little laugh at it. But it's pretty wild. So thank you for breaking all this down. This was really informative.
It's all over. One day I'll get better, Kyle, where I can stick on a topic without my notes one of these days.
No, you're perfectly fine. I have a bunch of notes. Like most of my podcasts, I write scripts and everything to keep on track. So I'm with you. This was great. I like the breakdown because it all ties into the same theme.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It's history. Some of it could be fake. Some of it could be true. There were things in the past that looked a lot nicer and brighter and more majestic than they do now for some reason. And,
right.
you know, you would think with all the technology we have now that we could 3D print something that looks anything like this, but it just has never happened that way. So
yeah, we're landing on Mars, for God's sake. We can't build a nice building. Crazy.
I mean, I'll tell you, in the 50s, they were calling the moon from the president's office.
Right,
and,
dude. Yeah.
You know,
yeah.
in 2021, I can't even get a cell signal from my basement.
Exactly, dude.
It's what happened in that past time. So, well, anyways, Jack, thank you very much for coming on.
Dude.
This was great. Tell everybody where they can find you.
Yeah.
And most importantly, how can they find your podcast, and how can they support the work you're doing?
Dude, I got a conspiracyorjustacoincidence.com. You can find all my stuff there if you're not on Twitter, but at conspiracyorjc. I'm on YouTube, same tagline, but you can just go to my website. It's conspiracyorjustacoincidence.com, and got shirts that my fiance makes, so you can check those out. And thanks for having me on the show, dude.
Absolutely. What kind of do you have any kind of sneak peek for stuff you have coming up on your podcast soon? Yeah,
I'm doing the it's called Weird Scenes Inside the Canyon. So it's all the hippie music, and dude, that's a whole. But I don't know if every single one of them is military intelligence, dude.
Yes,
they're leading us like sheep to the slaughter, or whatever the saying is, dude.
Yeah, if anybody listening hasn't listened to the podcast that you just did with Bob, Sideshow Bob's Lessons, go check that out. That's a good kind of lead into what you're going to talk about there.
Yeah.
With the Laurel Canyon stuff, and the Doors, and all those all those artists of the 60s, and how they were so tied in the military.
Dude. Harry Houdini was one of the first spies. That's it. I gotta go.
Wow, I gotta write that down. That's awesome. I love it.
I'll send you the book.
Awesome.
All right, dude.
Jack, thank you very much.
Thanks, Kyle.
Once again, this is Conspiracy in the Force. My name is Conspiracy Kyle. May the Force be with you, and have a great night, everybody.